Before the world was overrun with loot-laden dungeons and stat-heavy heroics, there was Gateway to Apshai, a true pioneer in the murky depths of top-down dungeon crawling. Long before the term action RPG became a buzzword, this one was swinging swords and opening chests like it had something to prove. And let's be honest, for those of us who played it back in the day, the only thing grander than its legacy might be our own waistlines now. So pop on your nostalgia goggles and join me for a fond and slightly bewildered look back at this formative classic. Released in 1983 by Epyx, it was a spin-off, or perhaps better described as a prequel to Temple of Apshai, a series that had its roots firmly planted in more traditional turn-based RPG mechanics. Gateway, however, decided to take a different route, embracing real-time combat that would go on to shape the direction of many future titles. The intriguing premise is that you play as a young adventurer, the last descendant of Apshai's greatest warrior, tasked with navigating through treacherous dungeons leading to the fabled Temple of Apshai. While the temple itself was never reached, the journey is filled with a staggering 128 dungeons, each more challenging than the last. What made this such a standout game was its labyrinth-style design, where you never quite knew what was lurking around the next corner, whether it was a monster or treasure waiting to be discovered. The real-time combat was, at the time, an exhilarating change from the typical RPGs of the era, where strategy and turn-based actions ruled. In Gateway to Apshai, you had to act quickly, with enemies charging at you relentlessly, making timing and quick reflexes as important as any in-game stats. There's a bit of a learning curve at first, just enough to make you feel slightly daft for the first 5 minutes, but once you've got the hang of things, it all ticks along rather nicely. Movement is handled via the joystick, with the fire button used to carry out your heroic deeds. F3 scrolls through your inventory. F5 is your go-to for all the practical bits, opening doors with keys, sniffing out traps, casting a search spell to reveal hidden doors, dropping items when you're full up, or checking your supplies like a cautious adventurer who's packed for a weekend but stayed for a fortnight. You can also peek at your health, stats and weapon loadouts. And when you're feeling bold, F7 lets you ready your weapon and switch between stabby, shooty and whatever else you've picked up down there. It's a surprisingly comprehensive little system, tucked neatly behind a few keys and a lot of dungeon grime. The simple controls were intuitive enough to keep you in the action, though some of the game's more oddball decisions, like the lack of on-screen health bar, certainly made things more challenging than they needed to be. The dungeon design itself was a strange mix of random and meticulously crafted environments. As mentioned, it featured 128 dungeons, which was a staggering number for the time, but they weren't procedurally generated like later games in the genre. Instead, they were actually designed that way. The issue, of course, came after you had seen them all. Once you'd explored the 8 levels and finished the cycle, there wasn't much else to do but repeat them. This left us in a bit of a bind. While the exploration was engaging at first, the lack of a clear endgame quickly dulled the excitement. Still, there was no denying the sense of satisfaction that came with hoarding treasure, finding magical weapons and casting spells. While the fog of war mechanic borrowed from Sword of Fargol kept things fresh and unpredictable, you never quite knew if you were uncovering the next deadly trap or the key to a new treasure hoard. If you haven't played Sword of Fargol before, by the way, that's another classic I loved as a kid too. One of the most exciting aspects of Gateway to Apshai was the way it brought an action-oriented twist to the RPG formula. The games that followed would build upon this idea, blending the exploration and loot grinding aspects of dungeon crawlers with the fast-paced action that kept you on your toes. And of course, there were the inevitable compromises of the era. The visuals were functional, but nothing to write home about, and the sound was sparse at best, serving more as background noise than adding any real atmosphere to the game. The controls, while simple, could feel a little clunky, and the lack of a real progression system left us all stuck in an endless loop of dungeon diving. Yet, despite these shortcomings, Gateway to Apshai was a game that lived up to its promise. A fast, action-packed dungeon crawl that offered a glimpse into the future of RPGs. It wasn't perfect, and it lacked the depth and polish of some of its contemporaries, but, in many ways, it was a game ahead of its time. shaping what would become an entire subgenre. Looking back, Gateway to Apshai was a key stepping stone in the evolution of action RPGs, and for anyone who played it back in the day, it was a memorable experience that stands the test of time. If you haven't yet played it, then get it fired up on your Commodore 64 and give it a whirl. Thanks for watching guys, hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and do be sure to share your experiences with this game in the comment section. As always, your continued support is massively appreciated, but for those new to the channel, please consider subscribing and following me on this epic journey down memory lane. There's plenty more games on the channel playlists and more coming up next, so hopefully I'll see you all on another Commodore 64 or indeed Commodore Amiga video within the channel. Until then, bye for now.